Hi, everyone, and welcome to Module 7 in Synthetic Biology by the University of Rochester's iGEM 2020 team. My name is Emily, and today we'll be learning about ethics in synthetic biology. So before we get started, let's go over the checklist for Module number 7. You're going to want to read the article, From Corgis to Corn, a brief look at the long history of GMO technology. You're also going to want to open Google Form number 7 and follow along when prompted to answer questions in the form. So what are we going to talk about in today's module? Here's an overview. We're going to look at the dual-use dilemma, define what it is, and talk about why we care about it. We're also going to look at 3 ethical themes in synthetic biology. Additionally, we're going to talk about popular topics that you probably have heard about for ethical discussion in synthetic biology and genetic engineering. We're also going to take a look at when it's not so black and white, when synthetic biology hits the gray area of ethics, and what we should do in that situation. And then finally, we're going to review the activity that you'll complete after the module. Is this ethical? Before we continue, pause the video and open Google Form number 7 and answer this question in question number 1. What ethical concerns in science have you heard from friends, family, or the media? These could be ethical concerns that you have or ethical concerns that you have heard others have. And if you want, put more than one. So what is the dual-use dilemma? Dual-use dilemma is a term that we use to describe a piece of technology that has both the ability to do good and to do harm. As advancements are made in synthetic biology, it's important that ethicists, researchers, and the general public take a step back and say, how can this piece of technology not just benefit society, but potentially hurt society if placed in the wrong hands? And what types of regulations should be around that technology to ensure that it is only used to benefit individuals and to benefit society? As we continue our discussion about ethics and popular topics, you're going to notice that some key themes come up, which is how can GMOs affect individual health? How can they affect society and human rights? And how can they affect economics and power? And just to clarify, when we use the term GMO, we mean genetically modified organisms. So that could be anything from humans to animals to food to bacteria and viruses. And if those things have any of their genes edited to give a new characteristic or function, then we call them a GMO. So something that you guys are probably pretty familiar with is GMOs in agriculture. When you hear the term GMO, you probably think food right away, just because we talk about it so much in the media and in the general public. So here to discuss GMOs in agriculture with me is Megan from the iGEM 2020 team. Hey, Megan.
Hi, Emily.
So what are some benefits of producing genetically modified crops?
Well, there are a lot of benefits. Through bioengineering, there are lower production costs and higher crop yields. We can also engineer food that contains more nutrients and repels insects. These innovations help provide enough food to feed the growing population.
Wow, that's pretty cool. But how will the GMOs affect my individual health if I eat them?
Well, that is a concern many people have. So far, research shows that GMOs are safe to eat, but further research is being conducted to see if there are any other considerations we should have.
So how will I know if what I'm eating is a GMO?
Well, everyone has the right to decide what they should put inside of their body. Whether or not you want to eat GMOs is a personal choice, which is why people in the US are advocating for labeling laws where foods contain labels like the one shown on the screen. This lets consumers make decisions for themselves about what they're eating.
Well, are there any other ethical concerns that you've heard about for GMOs?
Actually, yes. Since GMOs are a form of scientific research, some people are concerned that companies will patent genetically modified crops. This will create a power imbalance in the food industry.
Wow, Megan, I never thought about that. And you bring up a lot of good ethical points to consider. So why don't we focus our attention now onto viruses and bacteria as GMOs?
So, Emily, what do you know about the benefits of genetically modifying viruses and bacteria?
There are so many, Megan. You can genetically modify bacteria to create pharmaceuticals, which can help treat diseases. You can even diagnose diseases like what we're doing for our iGEM team, while we're trying to use bacteria to help diagnose endometriosis. You can also use bacteria to degrade plastic to help the environment and to produce a green source of energy. And viruses can be used to deliver drugs in the human body.
That's amazing. So if bioengineering bacteria and viruses have all these great uses, why are people concerned about these GMOs?
Well, Megan, if in the wrong hands, potentially bacteria and viruses can be genetically modified for bioterrorism and biowarfare, where really bad diseases can be given to people based on where they live or their genetic makeup. And that's really concerning.
Wow, this is an important human rights issue people must consider when looking at the ethics of GMOs. Speaking of human rights, why don't we take a look at the ethics of genetic modification in humans? With advancements in synthetic biology, such as CRISPR, gene modification is becoming even easier to do now.
Megan, think of all the diseases we can cure using CRISPR. We can prevent diseases that cause premature death in infancy, childhood, and early adulthood. And we can also prevent diseases that show up later in life, such as breast cancer.
Yeah, all these possibilities are exciting to think about, but we also need to take a step back and analyze the concerns surrounding this technology.
Yeah, you're right. So, what concerns do people have here?
Well, if there are unforeseen health consequences, we don't know. What if the tools to genetically modify the individual doesn't function properly, leading to worse clinical outcomes for that individual?
Yeah, individual health definitely needs to be one of our top priorities when considering CRISPR. But we also should probably think about how CRISPR could affect society structure and who has power in society. Given that this is resource heavy and very expensive, would only the wealthy be able to use genetic modification? So would only the healthy not get these diseases? And will that just create a larger gap between the lower and the upper class in society?
Yeah, there are a lot of questions scientists, politicians, ethicists, and the general public need to think critically about before we consider implementing these technologies. Even after they are implemented, we need to decide, where do we draw the line?
That's right, Megan. In our lifetimes, we are probably going to have to make this decision. To what extent will we allow genetic modification? And there's some applications where objective good is being done, such as therapies for cancer and taking away diseases that cause premature death. And there's also objective harm, such as discriminating based on genetic makeup. But then we hit a gray area where it's not so clear what we should be doing, such as changing eye color. So pause the video and answer this question. What should we consider things like changing eye color? Is it ethical or not? And also, thank you, Megan, for joining us today. We had a great discussion about the pros and cons of genetic modification through agriculture, bacteria, viruses, and humans.
Thank you for having me, Emily. I'm always happy to talk about all these concerns since they're such important topics.
Great. All right, I'll see you at our team meeting, Megan. So we went over a lot today with the help of Megan. Why don't we review what we talked about? We talked about the dual use dilemma and how that is a term that we use to describe technology that can do both good and harm, and how the general public, ethicists, and researchers really need to consider the dual use dilemma when looking at new advances in synbio. We also talked about the three key themes in synthetic biology and how they apply to agriculture, bacteria, viruses, and human gene editing, which are popular topics today in genetic modifications. And finally, we went over how it's not so black and white what the ethics are regarding these issues, especially when it comes to things like changing hair color, changing eye color. We don't know what those are. Are they good or are they harm? And there's no right answer to this. So here's the activity you're going to complete today. Is this ethical? You're going to look at two different scenarios where we talk about GMOs in food and GMOs in human modification for diseases. Read these carefully and then sit back and think about how, in this case, genetic modification could affect individual rights, individual health, society structure and power, and economics. Then reflect on whether or not you think it's ethical. You're going to want to answer this in Google Form number 7. Well, that's all I have for you today. So thank you for joining me. And if you have any questions, feel free to email us. Bye, everyone.